name is Manar Naeem. I am from Syria and I study masters in quantum computing. I'm also a musician and I play this instrument. It's called oud. It's a Middle Eastern instrument and it's a string instrument. It has 11 strings. 5 of them are pair of strings. And it has the same ancestor as the guitar. I work with the Canadian Arabic Orchestra as an oudist, and I teach at the Canadian Arabic Conservatory of Music oud instrument.
My name is Hernden, and I'm a self-taught artist working out of Globe Studios in downtown Kitchener. So I've been making art, more full-time for the last 3 years. Originally, I was really drawn to patterns. I still am, all patterns, but originally it was sort of sacred geometry, Islamic tile patterns, nature. And then more recently, I've been really delving into using patterns found throughout the community in my everyday life and celebrating them through my artwork. So my camera roll is filled with pictures all the time of all of my adventures throughout the city and my walks downtown. And when it comes time to actually creating the piece, I go through the photos. I usually have a really solid idea of what I want ahead of time, and I map it out on graph paper first. And then I take those and map it onto the canvas, lots of measuring, protractors, rulers. And when I've got that down, I add acrylic paint. I use a lot of tape to get the straight lines and edges, like large tape piles growing around me all the time. And then my favorite part is probably hand sewing the embroidery thread on afterwards. I love the juxtaposition of like these kind of really solid, straight, digital looking pieces, and then this hand sewn quality of the embroidery thread over top. It's sort of laborious and painstaking to do them, but it's very satisfying and meditative. And I love to, afterwards, the result, it gives it sort of a 3-dimensionality, and depending on where you're standing, the threads shift and saturate in color, sometimes looking solid and sometimes fanning out. Naming my pieces is another one of my favorite parts. I usually give them pretty arbitrary titles, usually kind of an inside joke with myself or something that stood out, a piece of a conversation I heard walking down the street. Sometimes they're more sentimental, to do with something my family said or something like that. This one is called Son of Suns, King of Kings, Moon and Stars. It's a nickname we have for our son, which probably is going to give him a bit of a big head later on in life. And it is inspired by a convenience store on King Street East, kind of across from the market. It's a karate. There's karate, a hairdresser, laundromat, and it's the cinder block work above it. So it uses the same pattern, and then the little yellow at the bottom there is the part of the sign, the yellow sign. This one is inspired by a tile in the bathroom at Arabella Park, and the title of this one is Nice Things Are Nice. So my other alter ego is a grade 7 English teacher. I teach part-time. And I always tell my kids, my students, I don't like the words nice or things in their writing. And so I just kind of named it Nice Things Are Nice as a joke to myself, my English teacher self. This one is called 4 Shades of Blue. It's one of the very few, it's actually one of the only pieces in this body of work that has no color, but originally I was going to paint it with 4 shades of blue. Then when I did it on the graph paper first and I saw the black and white, I was like, that's perfect. I just want to leave it like that. So I just used black thread on the white canvas. And it's inspired by Manulife Center, I think, at Union and Park Street. I think it's Manulife, that really cool building at the corner of Union and Park. This one's called Waking Life. It is inspired by a optical store at Stanley Park Mall. Like it looks just like that, except it's white and 3-dimensional wall outside of this optical store. So I was just collecting my groceries and taking pictures of it. It felt very graphic to me, almost kind of like a comic. And so the title is from the movie Waking Life, which is sort of comic based. The next one is Calmer Than You Are. It is inspired by the bowling alley at Victoria and Ottawa Street. Obviously, I don't know if you're a Big Lebowski fan, but the scene when they're like leaving the bowling alley and John Goodman's character, he's like, calmer than you are, Donnie, right? Yeah. He's like, calmer than you are. And the police are coming or whatever. It just made sense, bowling and Big Lebowski. This one's called, wait, I forget the name of it, sorry. I had it, got it. This one's called And Still Somehow. It's inspired by the building, I think it's U of W engineering building on the LRT line going towards Conestoga Mall. It's a glass building and it was reflecting the blue sky and the clouds. It made me think of the Joni Mitchell song, Both Sides Now. But I ended up making it purple. It was gonna be blue to kind of emulate the reflection, but I love working with purple and never have, so there we go. This one's called Schadenfreude, and it is the first one I did in this series, actually, and it's inspired by, I don't even know what the building is. It's across from City Hall. There's no title on it. I don't know what it is. It might be like corrections or something. Anyway, I named it that because I don't know, I'm fascinated, English teacher again, with words that exist in other languages for things that we all feel, but we don't have that word in our language. So Schadenfreude is the word for kind of deriving some pleasure in someone else's misery. And also this painting gave me a bit of misery and enjoyment when I was making it. The next one is called Hug Me. It is inspired by the bay, the brickwork on the bay at Fairview Mall. The name, I mean, this one was probably the most labor intensive as far as sewing goes. And I couldn't think of a title, but I definitely felt like I needed a hug after doing all of that sewing. So that's where that title came from. This one's called Today's Tuesday. This one is inspired by, I think it's You Save tiles and flooring on Victoria Street. They've actually subsequently done a mural on their wall, but originally it just looked like it was just blue, kind of three-dimensional geometric pattern. And the title was really just this was like middle of lockdown, and everyone was kind of just trudging through every day and wondering how we were gonna get through it, and I would be like one day at a time, and the mantra would be like, okay, today is Tuesday, I can do this day, and this one was finished on a Tuesday, so there you go. This one is called Come and Knock on My Door. It is inspired by a patio chair at McCabe's. I had to do a mural for the city of Waterloo on McCabe's door, so I took inspiration from, well, I was going to take inspiration from the inside, but it was during COVID, so I was sitting on the patio, and it was the chair had this cool little geometric pattern, so that's where that came from. And then the title, because it was going on a door, was a little nod to Three's Company.
The second piece I'm gonna be playing is called ذكرياتي, which means my memories in English. It was composed by Muhammad al-Qasabji, who's an Egyptian composer, and he was one of the best 5 composers in Egypt at his time in the 20th century. In the middle of the piece, I'm gonna be doing some improvisation, and it's on an Arabic scale called Rest. I hope you enjoy it.
Hey Young World, my name is Aaron Francis, aka Vintage Black Canada. I'm here with a good friend, a good collaborator, and definitely a mentor, my good homie Christian Snyder. How you doing, Christian?
Good. How are you?
Good, man. Thanks for joining me here at Gauker. I insisted that I did this brief chat with you because, number one, like I just love you to death. But number one, and we were talking about this off camera, you're the type of person that emphasizes the importance of art in people's lives. So visually, whenever I was doing concerts back in the day, doing events, it would be coming to you to have the posters printed.
Yeah.
And not just on some Kinko shit, no disrespect. I'm just saying like you are a legitimate printer. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah. I mean, back in the day, I remember too, you guys would always come in and you'd be like, I want this poster, but I want it on gold paper. Do you have gold paper?
And you would literally be like, I can get you the gold paper.
Yeah.
It's rare though. And you were kidding. So back in the day, you were saying this is like pre-Facebook and all that, and you had to do handbills and your posters had to be sexy. And people would steal our posters out of the Starlight or the Jane Bond or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was our sort of visual. We'd have these talks. I'd come by with files, we'd talk art, printmaking, layout. Usually it was a John Cut original.
Yeah.
But then you approached me on some like something that really touched me, and that's why I've always latched onto you as a dope cat, because you were like referencing my lyrics to me. And you've mentioned this before, and we might have talked before, but I had some lyrics about Slobodan Milosevic.
Yeah.
And you're like one of the only few people in the world that like heard that lyric and then said something back to me about that.
Yeah, well, I remember that night, and because I was at the Starlight, and we hadn't met yet, and it was one of your shows, and I think hip hop at the time was kind of going through maybe a little bit of a lull, and there wasn't a lot of original stuff that I was hearing, and not that I'm the biggest hip hop head in the world, but certainly I like listening to music, and when you got on the mic, I was listening to what you were saying, and there was like geopolitical stuff. I was like, hang on a second, I got to meet this guy, because you're on a different tip. Like you're doing something, and you're thinking about this in a way that I hadn't seen, and so I was like, I got to meet this guy, and that was I think the first night that we met.
I believe so.
Yeah.
So much of what I've done has been inspired by our conversations. And so when it came to asking artists to reinterpret certain aspects of the Vintage Black Canada archive, there are some dope pieces that are in this collaboration that are essentially replicas, if you will, or expansions on an existing photograph. But this doesn't actually exist.
No.
And so it was based on a conversation that we had and an idea that I had, wherein talking about iconography and Americana, if you will, and Andy Warhol. This is a reference towards Andy Warhol had his soup cans.
Yeah.
Right. It's Campbell soup cans, and they are obviously famous for many. But the thing is, when I looked at those soup cans, as much as I can appreciate Warhol and what he's contributed to the art world, I never grew up using Campbell's soup cans.
Right.
There are all kinds of cans that my family would open as a second generation Canadian and as a descendant of Jamaicans. Can culture is real on the island, right?
Yeah.
From bully beef, which is, I forget what they call that in non-patois, but it's like beef in a can. Aki, we use those in a can. Saying mackerel if push came to shove. And of course, coconut milk, it's a staple. And so in having this collaboration, I asked you to reinterpret Warhol, but with something from my iconography, if you will.
Yeah, it was interesting too, because I didn't know what you thought of like the choice of coconut milk, because it was one of those things, because I think I did that, and I was like, I wonder how Aaron's going to react to that, because it's not necessarily, for me, it's Grace, it's the islands, it's all of that, but it's something that I have in my cupboard, right? And the thing that I really liked about this, I mean, if you go back to Warhol and the soup cans, and there's this whole idea of like monumentalizing the mundane, and there's a lot of really cool stuff there. But there's a joy in what he was doing, because it's Campbell's soup. This was America. This makes you feel good. It's a warm mug of tea. It's
everyday folks can relate.
Absolutely. And I think the thing that was kind of fun about this project while I was doing it to think about, my guess is that, at least in Waterloo region, there are a lot more coconut milk cans in people's cupboards than there are Campbell soup cans. So this is maybe the new, mug of tea or whatever, right?
Facts.
So. Which
is fascinating, because honestly, here I was thinking, oh, this is a radical idea, Let's do Warhol, but with let's do some West Indian cans. And then you're just pointing out to me like, you know what? That's pretty common right now. Like, in terms of people will, I wanted to prompt people to think about what I was trying to imply with this, but it is perhaps, as you said, memorializing the mundane. It is perhaps not as radical in afterthought.
Yeah, but again, I think that there's a joy to it. I mean, when we were talking about it, one of the things that I liked about it is conceptually it was incredibly simple. And I think too, especially in time of COVID and all of this, you can get overly esoteric. You can get, you know what I mean? And there is, for me, the joy in this is the fact that it is, first of all, it's immediately recognizable as something that we've seen before. And then second of all, there is that twist in it where it's like, oh, but that's not a soup can. And then third, it's like, yeah, but I have that can, right? And so it still is that warm mug of tea, if I can use that analogy. Mm-hmm. But it's a thing, right? You know what I mean? It's not something that's gonna, you can think about it, but it doesn't have to be heavy.
Trust.
Right?
Yeah. It's just art.
Yeah, exactly. It's just art.
Vintage Black Canada was so fortunate to collaborate with Crystal Ball on this piece. Crystal Ball is a Jamaican-born artist currently residing in Toronto. I love how Crystal is able to depict the feminine divine, and more than simply reinterpreting the photograph, which this is based on, it's a photograph of my mom. Crystal was able to frame it in such a way that I think really highlights the magic that is the Black woman. Trisha Abe did this piece. I've got so much respect for Trisha, such a hardworking artist and out-of-the-box thinker. Trisha took 2 distinct photos from the archive that I have at Vintage Black Canada and combined them into one. Now, these 2 photos, the underlying theme, of course, is the phones, and you almost get the sense that these 2 people are talking to each other. Funny enough, that is based on a photo that my grandfather took of my mom back in the day, and this is based on a photo that Chad McPherson lent to me of his mother, Miss V, who owns Cut and Style. Lastly, this one here is a painting courtesy of Dan Burton. Dan Burton literally just hit me up like, I'm inspired by your initiative, I'm inspired by your call for artists, and I'd like to submit some pieces. I was like, of course, Dan, we've been talking for years, and this is a depiction of my Uncle Errol. My Uncle Errol is a rock star, and I feel like Dan really captured the rock star persona and flair, especially in the eyes. One thing that Dan did was made this monochromatic, just in black and white, and even though you can't see the jewels that are in the photo initially, Dan really did a good job when he's detailing these rock and roll punk pieces that my uncle is rocking, the feathers, the dreads, etc. Thank you.